All right, I think we're live. So I'm just gonna wait for people to trickle in before I begin. It's been an interesting week so far. Kind of glad that it stopped. That the rain abated for a little bit at least, although it's a bit overcast today. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Anthony Fauci emails. Actually, the not so much the emails themselves, but the press coverage of the asked whether asked why. I think this was Alan Bukhari, the guy who writes for Breitbart, asked why, or asked his followers why they thought Fauci these Fauci emails were released in the first place because um, obviously the intent with Fauci is to cover up any incriminating evidence or basically anything that will expose the fact that this person is a malicious hypocrite who has had 100 different, often mutually contradictory stances on any issue related to this virus and how to address it over the past year or so. And one of the things that's interesting about why these were disclosed, you have the ridiculous spin used by CNN and all of these other cable news outlets and newspapers trying to depict this person as heroically fighting against the Neanderthals and the Trump administration. The people want people to die en masse. It's just such a ridiculous proposition that this person who spent the past year trying to accrue power he's basically, and this is what I think a lot of people don't misunderstand about bureaucrats and government officials, the people who rise to the top levels of power, not just in the United States, but in any country, any state system. These people are ineluctably going to be sociopaths. They're not people that you can trust with your life. Not that you should be trusting non-government officials either, but the idea that you should trust someone like Fauci, who's not a scientist so much as a bureaucrat. Fauci, hey, good to see you here. It's good to see some friends are watching. But yeah, the idea that you should trust someone who spent his entire life just accruing, like I said, he's a bureaucrat, not a scientist. I mean, the fact that he's referred to as doctor. Hi, Irene. Hi, GW. The fact that he's referred to as a doctor is misleading. It makes it seem as if your health is his foremost priority. The idea that he's looking out to prevent you from contracting some potentially deadly communicable disease, and that he cares for your welfare and your well-being is simply nonsense. And I think most of the people have realized this. You have someone who spent, even going back to the 1980s, who spent his career just to seize power and manipulate public opinion. I don't know if he was actually a clinician. I mean, honestly, I haven't done that much research into the beginning of his career. One of the things that's cited is his work on HIV and AIDS during the 1980s. But again, he's one of these people, kind of like C. Everett Koop and some of these other Washington scientists, quote unquote, who is useful for whatever media campaign, whatever public health campaign the media deems necessary. And a lot of the things he said are simply, I mean, even unrelated to COVID, simple. And Michael Fomento has actually written books about this. He was one of these people that argued that heterosexual males were just as likely to, or the risk of HIV/AIDS to heterosexual males was just as it was just as much of a risk as other groups, other carriers like homosexuals and intravenous drug users. He basically made no distinction between different vectors for this disease, which of course turned out to be completely false. Yeah, I mean, I would, even if you would fire him, you would definitely go to a second opinion. It's kind of ridiculous, the people who don't seek out second opinions. If you were diagnosed with a serious illness, one of the first things you would do is seek out second and third opinions, and or more diagnostic tests, trying to figure out whether or not this is whether or not what you're diagnosed with is whether or not you actually have that illness. You wouldn't just accept it on blind faith that after one test. You would actually look for alternative opinions within among the medical community. And the idea that we should just accept the word of someone who's dissembled and changed his mind repeatedly, and whose original prognostications and diagnoses were completely wrong. I mean, the mask thing is just the most prominent. The fact that this is someone who at the outset of this pandemic suggested that you shouldn't wear masks, and then did a complete 180, and now is ridiculing people who don't suffocate themselves when they go outside is ridiculous. And even now that they're starting to loosen up some restrictions, you have Fauci maintaining the same stance. So, yeah, the fact that these emails are being released now, I think part of it is messaging in order to keep him in the public spotlight, to continue to continue to maintain the frame that this is someone who can be trusted, that this is someone who's reliable and whose advice is trustworthy, and to dissuade any sort of criticism of what his recommendations are. And I think increasingly you're going to see people tire of that. I mean, there's still a huge segment of the population that has deified him and has lambasted anyone who dares so much as to offer a word of criticism towards Fauci. But I think increasingly you're just going to see people realize that this is not so, that he's like any other politician. He's not the trick here has been to try to convince people that he's this disinterested voice of science, quote unquote, whatever science is, and the idea that science is a set of just a set of recommendations that the establishment can trot out. Science is a process of questioning things, of putting out a hypothesis and testing it, and revising your original thesis. So these are people who don't even understand what the scientific process is, to be honest. And there are other people. There are other people in response to the Bukhari tweet that actually suggested that this is simply setting him up to take the fall once the house of cards collapses. Once people realize that the past year of lockdowns, of confining people to their homes, has been not only a quote unquote public health disaster, but it's been disastrous for the economy. It's had numerous other catastrophic downsides. Hi, Tower Time. And there are people, and this is more of a cynical view, that this is simply a way of setting up Fauci for to eventually be cast aside, kind of like Bill Gates is kind of like what they're doing to Bill Gates right now, who used to be this Solon, this guy that there was sort of a troika of Fauci, Gates, and Fauci, Gates, and who was the other doctor that they trotted out at the beginning? Bartowski. I forget her name, but yeah, social scientists should be studying this. And I mean, it's kind of amazing that you still see this resistance to rationally looking at what the past year of lockdowns and you're still seeing that in other countries. In Australia, they've imposed a lockdown where they're basically not letting you leave your house for they're not letting you out of your house, with the exception of a few narrow reasons. They arrested a pastor and a group of people in Melbourne for assembling. And in Canada, they've been arresting pastors and confiscating church property for the past year, really, but it's past few weeks and months. They're arresting people for even questioning some of these government responses to, I wouldn't even say the virus, because like in the case of Australia, you have no one, or virtually one or two people hospitalized with the coronavirus, and yet they're shutting down society more or less. It's really insane. And it's funny that one of the BuzzFeed, as trash as BuzzFeed is, generally speaking, one of the BuzzFeed reporters actually, I think, linked to the trove of Fauci emails, so you could actually look at them for yourself rather than having them filtered through the prism of um, completely and utterly useless mainstream press organs. You can actually examine these emails for yourself, and what you'll find is that this is a complete narcissist and sociopath. It's not someone that you'd want to less the health of 300 million people. So it's just a few thoughts, a few brief thoughts on what's happening with the Fauci gang. Anyway, thanks, Irene. Tower Time, uh, the Sixth Ward, great blogger. And I will talk to you all soon.